YouTube, what is going on? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Guys, today I'm talking about something that I talk about all the time. Talking about it again, and that's how you collect comics. The big thing that I always say is there's no right or wrong way to collect comics, and I just feel a bit discouraged because I continue to see people, that are negative or have negative outlooks on those who collect different than them. And I know I'm not going to change the world or change anyone's minds, but I want to touch on the different variables of collecting and really allow all of you collectors watching to understand two things. One, the way that you collect is not wrong. So no matter what anybody may say, do what you do no matter what. And two, if you see someone else collecting differently than you, try to be understanding and humble to their style, right? So let's just go into it first by looking at the few obvious variables of comic books. Now, the core of the comic book is obviously the story, and reading in general is a huge thing, and the idea of the reading with the visual art, I think, really sets comic books apart. I'm a big advocate for reading in general. I'm not gonna say just read comics. There's a lot of other good stuff out there to read. We know that when you look at like fictional novels or stories, reading words off the paper and being able to use your imagination to create, to see the story in your head is huge. But I don't think it's a takeaway to say that, what comics did with adding that visual art element. I mean, it's another creative aspect. And also as an artist, I think it inspires a different side of the art with the literature. So, reading comic books can inspire people in multiple ways. But that brings us to the art as well. Art is inspiring in itself, and I think the art of comic books is unique to its own genre as well. And if there's people out there that just collect for the art and they're not really into the stories, I obviously understand. There's something about the visual appeal of comic book art, especially when we talk about cover art. And this has been a big craze for 10, 20 years now. And at the height of, making variants extremely popular, and people willing to pay, 5+ times the cover price for a new book just because it has a variant cover of some art from an artist that they truly enjoy. And, in the technological age that we're in, there's so many different ways to utilize different art styles. We are able to take, pencil or pen art and implement digital art with that. You have artists like Alex Ross who use brilliant watercolors. There's just so much amazing art out there. And hey, people spend hundreds and thousands of dollars for framed paintings and framed artwork, right? So that correlates to the cover of a comic book. If somebody wants to pay top dollar amount for a comic book just because they enjoy the cover art, and maybe they want to put in a frame or put in a slab from CGC or something like that and hang it on the wall, you have to understand the appeal in that. So, I'll get into the details surrounding the backlash on these things later, but let's just go over the remaining elements here. Obviously, next is collecting just for the value of things. Now, I've been a collector my whole life. I've collected baseball cards, sports cards, comic books, Hot Wheels, toys. I tried collecting coins and stamps at some point. That didn't last long. But you know what? I just, the idea of collecting to collect, but the idea of collecting to receive a return on investment, there was something there too. I remember collecting Beanie Babies when the hype was out for these things, like having extreme resale value in terms of return on investment years down the line. That didn't pan out, obviously, but it's an art form in itself. It's just like, when people invest in the stock market, right? Like, I know that, I did a paper, I believe it was last year, maybe it was 2018, about how if you're going to put money into a portfolio, right? Stock portfolio. I believe that what were the three big stocks to invest in. One was McDonald's. McDonald's just had a new CEO come on board, and their stock was extremely healthy. Another one was Starbucks. And what was the third? I believe the third was, it was something else. It wasn't like a retail industry. But anyways, the point being is, if I'm to look into the stock market and say, oh, McDonald's and these things, and I'm going to, you know, divide up a portfolio into these stocks, it's not because I'm a fan of McDonald's. I actually don't eat I don't eat fast food really. And I can't really stand McDonald's in terms of their food and their product. But as somebody that is looking for a return on investment, if their stock is going to be one that gives that to me, I'm going to invest in them. So it's just like comic books. An investor can look at comic books as a means to bring in a return on investment later on, right? They don't have to love comics for either the art or the stories. They are just involved in the idea of investing for the sake of investing. Okay? I think those are the main top 3 reasons to why I think most collectors collect. You got people that read, you got people that are in it for the art, and you got people that are in it for the investment purposes. But if you take those 3 things, and I've talked about this before, usually the majority of investors are not one or the other. They usually have a little bit of all 3 things. And it's just a matter of like what percentage in which category, right? So for me, I think I'm almost equal across the board. And let me explain that. I have over 16,000 comic books. I've read thousands of them, but I'm probably not even half. That's just because it's hard to get time on your hands to do so. But I want to read all my books, so therefore I am truly a reader of comics. I'm constantly reading comics, even though it may not be like 5, 10 comic books a day. That's how much I would need in order to keep up, maybe even more, and that's just crazy, right? But I am truly a reader of comics. I mean, I'm a collector of runs. I like collecting runs because I like to be able to have all of the story to where I can go back and read the story from beginning to end. But especially being an artist myself, I am as much of a collector because of the art. Bad art in comic books turns me off, and art is subjective. So what's bad for me might be good for you and vice versa. But if there's artists that I don't really enjoy, it's going to turn me off. And there's been a lot of modern art where it's like, it's hard for me to get into the story because the art itself is just so bad to me. And it's just really hard to look at the pages and pull the story out when I'm just distracted by this art that is just turning me off, right? So, cover art. I love cover art. I mean, I will buy comic books just because they have an awesome cover or because they're an artist that I enjoy. You know, I've done videos on variant collections, or not even variant collections, but I have a box where I've taken comic book covers, whether they're variant or standard covers, of certain artists like Alex Ross or John Romita Sr., you know, and I put them in a certain box as a artist run, so to say. You know, art is big for me, and I understand the idea of something like CGC or CBS and these companies as slabbing these pieces as a way to merely have an aesthetic look to these books. Now we'll get into what else CGC and slabbing a book does in a second here, but I understand that, hey, if you have money in your pocket, it goes back to what I was saying about art pieces. Like you buy a painting from an art store for $500, you know, and you're going to put a high priced nice frame around it too, and you're going to want to invest in making it look visually and aesthetically appealing. You're going to hang it up on your wall. Now personally, I'm still not hanging up comics on my walls really, but I enjoy what a nice cover in a CGC slab looks like just in terms of the aesthetic. So these things are all valid. I'm not wrong here, right? So let's go to investment. I am definitely an investor. Now, and I've said this before too, I have sold maybe 5 books in my lifetime. I am not here to invest and speculate on comics so I can ride the market and flip them when I think the market is at its peak so I can get the highest rate of return. That's not how I invest in comics. My investment is extremely long term, and really it's hypothetical in a sense, because I don't ever see myself selling comics. But say I'm in a rut and I'm in need of money. So that's why when I'm spending money on comic books, I always have in the back of my head, what's my return on investment going to be? I think about putting my kids through college. If I can, might sell some of my books to be able to put them in college or retirement, certain things like this. But ultimately, I hope to pass down my books to my kids or grandchildren and so forth. That's another appeal for me, actually, is a collection being passed down through generations, like heirlooms, right? But so ultimately, though, speculating and investing is always in the back of my head, and it's fun. And as a businessman, as a business major, somebody that studied this, studied finance, I love being able to look at collecting as a marketplace, right? It's fun for me, even though I'm not sitting here flipping books, right? So I just explained that I have basically all three of these core elements of what a collector is in me, and they're all valid. So, you know, let's break them apart, okay? Let's go back to reading. Now, there are people out there that read comic books just to read comic books because they enjoy the stories, right? And I've talked about my son before. I'm going to say it again. My son, he's 12 years old now. He still doesn't really take care of his comic books. And it cringes me a lot, right? Because, you know, a lot of us collectors, we want to keep our comic books pristine. We're into bagging and boarding, keeping them in high grades, pressing, cleaning, all this stuff, right? He just goes hard on them. He manhandles them, and there's nothing I can do about it. He's gotten better over the years. But the thing is, he reads his book. He reads a lot of his books more than once. So I give him, like, tips, and I feed him the knowledge or the advice. But then at the end of the day, I let him do his own thing, because that's what he enjoys. Who am I to say, you know, son, that's not the right way. Don't do it like that. And it takes the enjoyment out of it for him. I don't want to take the enjoyment out of it for him. And the enjoyment for him is being able to not worry about, oh, this book is an 8.5 or a 9.4. He doesn't worry about that, and he just dives into the story and the reading, and he loves it. So for those of us that like to keep our books in good condition and do cringe when we see somebody handling a book the wrong way, if it doesn't matter to them, if the value of the book is not a monetary value, then just let it go. I mean, it's cringy to look at, and it hurts sometimes. I get it, but don't knock them for it. That's them. If they want to spend the money, read the story, and not worry about the condition of their book, let it be, right? It doesn't affect how we collect. Actually, it does affect how we collect in a good way, because if there's collectors out there that aren't taking care of their books, it's ultimately going to drive the value of those books up, because there's going to be less high grade of those issues. So they're actually helping us out, those that like collect for maybe investment purposes, right? All right, moving on to the next one, the art. This is where I hear a lot of negative feedback. And it hurts me, man. And I get it. Like, I bought two variants where I've spent a decent amount of money on. Okay, one was the Venom #1 that came out a couple years ago. That was a ASM 300 cover swipe, Mayhew cover from Unknown Comics, I believe. I think I spent $40 on it. I think it was $40. And another ASM 300 cover swipe was the ASM 800 Shattered Comics variant, where it's basically the ASM 300, but it's like the Shattered. You guys can go look up Shattered Comics, because it looks like kind of like a mosaic almost. So, and I paid maybe $30 for that. Those are the only two. Now, don't get me wrong, I bought variants. Like, I like DC having the option of an A and B variant for all their new releases, but you're paying a cover price, right? So other than those two, I think I bought some variants like on sale, like on Midtown sales or something, like some Star Wars variants. And maybe they were like $5 at like 60% off or something. So they were originally like $20 and ended up being like $5 or $6. I think I bought a few there, but I never really spent a lot of money on variants. But hey, again, if somebody wants to spend that kind of money on a book just because it has a nice cover, that's their prerogative, and it's what makes them happy as a collector. It's not, the money is not coming out of your pocket. It's not coming out of my pocket. It's coming out of their pocket. And, you know, ultimately, it really goes back to people enjoying the art and doing, like I said, just like if people walked into a art museum and bought a piece for thousands of dollars, you know, that appeals to them. Now, this is going to lead into the talking point of the third piece, which is investing and speculating. Now, you guys might say, well, you know, people hop on the variant bandwagon not because they're into the art, but just because they think that it's a spec market and they're going to be able to buy like 5 or 10 of them and then sell them on eBay, you know, the next day for $100 or $200. Now, that's out there too, and that leads us into just talking about speculating on in return on investment overall. So again, you have to understand that comic books, and let me think about how to really put this for everyone to try to be on board here. Comic books are a product that, you know, they're not, there's no true definition on why you buy a comic book. Let me give an example. If you want to if you want to have nice hair, you're going out and you want to have nice hair, you go to the store and buy hair product. You can buy hairspray. Hairspray has a clear, like, this is what this is. It services something. It's a product that services something specifically, right? Hairspray or gel. You know, you have a headache, you buy Tylenol. It services something, right? Comic books, I mean, again, we could look back to what I was saying. They service something. They service art and reading and imagination and all these things. But again, I go back to things being a market. Comic books are not just about the product themselves. They're not just about the book themselves. Okay, they're about the brand behind the book, in a sense. The book itself is a brand, just like McDonald's is a brand. And you don't invest in the hamburger, right? You know, you invest in the stock. You invest in the brand and the business that is McDonald's. Starbucks stock, you don't invest in a latte. You invest in the brand and in the business of Starbucks. Now, I know it's a little different because in order to invest in the brand and the business of comics, unlike not needing the latte or the hamburger, you actually need the book. So it's a little different, but I hope you guys can get what I'm trying to say. In order to invest in the market of the comic book, you have to buy the comic books. And if people want to speculate on it, whether it be variants, whether it be speculations just because of a first appearance or a key character that makes a book a key sought-out book, there is no rules involved that say you can't do this. A comic book is meant to be read, right? I mean, you can't do that. I mean, now here's where I'm going to try to kind of bring this full circle. In these uncertain times right now with the pandemic going on and everything, we've seen hoarding going on, right? We saw toilet paper being bought out. We saw videos of people just acting like animals, fighting over toilet paper in Costco's, hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies. And I even read a couple stories about someone, there was one person in Canada, I believe, that had a garage full of cleaning supplies, and they were price gouging them on eBay. So they were taking a little bottle of hand sanitizer and selling it for like $50. And I believe they said he made like over like a month, he made over like $300,000 in profit. Okay, I'm bringing that up because of this. When a product is there to serve an essential need, and you hoard it like that, it's unjust. So I'm trying to relate to that with comic books. Now, obviously, comic books aren't an essential need. You know, we don't need them to survive. But that's a big argument that comes out. Well, it's not fair because speculators will wait on New Comic Book Wednesday. They'll hoard all the books and so forth. So I get that. I get that if you go into a comic book store on Wednesday, and you know that there's a book coming out, and you just want that book because that's your story. You know, say it's a Spider-Man book, right? And you just love reading Spider-Man. And Wednesday comes out and you go to the store and you're there early, but here's this guy that picked up all the books off the shelf because there's supposedly like a first appearance in there of a new character. And he buys 20, 30 copies off the shelf, whatever. That's everything that your LCS had. That's wrong in a sense because it doesn't allow anyone else in there just to get the book and the story that they're looking for. So I get it. But I don't blame the person going in there and pulling all the books off the shelf. I don't. I do not blame them. Because let's look at it like this. It is a free market. Okay? It's a free market. And that person, there was no rule for that said that person can't go in there and buy all those books. Now, personally, even if I was a speculator, I wouldn't do that. I would see what the store had. Maybe if they had 20 books, I'd say, okay, well, you know, let me get 5 or something. You know, that way I'm still speculating on it. I'm getting multiple copies that I could try to sell and flip. And then I'm a decent human being and I'm humble to everyone else wanting that book. But essentially, I can't sit here and yell and scream and point fingers at one individual. Because here's what needs to happen. There needs to be precedent of standards set. Starting probably with LCS owners. LCS owners should be first and foremost knowing what's going on with their books and knowing if a spec book is coming out. So we need to hold LCS owners accountable for saying, okay, look, we're going to put a limit on this book. Only 2 per customer, only 3 per customer. And I know that there's a couple online dealers that do that. Midtown does this. If there's a hot book, they will put only 1 or 2 per order, per customer, right? So there are things around that can help. Also for you, so you as a collector are in control of your own destiny. By not allowing somebody to walk in and grab all the books off the shelf. Call your store. If you know a book's coming, call your LCS owner. Call your local store and say, hey, can you put this issue on a pull list or can you hold a copy for me? And I guarantee you, I don't know one store owner that won't do that for you. Okay, so there's ways around it. I order my books off of Midtown as preview orders 3 months in advance and I get 35% off and I'm assured that I'm getting all the books that I want because the speculators can't hoard them and grab them right on the day of their release. So there are things around that. And I think the more that we understand this, the more that we can stop taking the approach of ridiculing and pointing fingers at other people. Now, again, that's not to say that we can't stand firm in our ethics, right? And what we believe. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be mad at them because you didn't get a book because there are so many other ways of doing so. Again, but with that said, if you are one that goes and grabs every book off the shelf, I would advise you to be more humble as well, even if you are a speculator. You got to understand, you don't want to hoard everything on the market and then upsell it because it's just, you got to think about ethics. We got to have some moral ground here. And although I want everyone that is into comic books for the love of investing to be able to get a return on investment, be humble, okay? Still be humble. So that's just my advice. It's not me telling you or someone else what to do. It's just friendly advice. So now I just want to talk a little bit more before we wrap up about the speculating issue because I think this is where a lot of collectors really shun others. Look, the important thing is that at the end of the day, what affects us is what we do. All right? What other people, we can't control what other people do. So I'm all about continuing to collect how we collect and letting others do their thing because it first off, it keeps the divide from happening and it keeps us from attacking one another, okay? Especially if we're in a community like this. Keeps the community positive. But here's the most important thing where we shun, whether it's speculating or whether it's people that collect variants or whatnot. I'm involved in a lot of Facebook communities and groups and whatnot that are for collectors. And I always see posts say, I'm new to collecting, and I heard that this book was hot. Speculating, should I get a couple issues of it, or should I send this book to CGC? And what I see in the comments is, ha ha ha, laugh, laugh, laugh. Like, what are you, a noob? Or like, it's like, that's I can't stand, people that just collect for variants, or you're ruining the market and all these things, or CGC's a scam and all this. Now, and again, it's like, I have my personal feelings towards CGC and the slabbing industry. I have my personal feelings about, I don't understand how people can spend $50 to $100 on variants. It's like crazy. I would just buy some, like back issue Bronze Age books for that. But that's just me. Again, I'm not saying what other people do is wrong. So when we ridicule, it's like we have to understand that we might be pushing people out of the hobby. And if you are a true collector, and I don't mean a true collector because you collect a certain way. No, you're a true collector because you have some sort of love for the hobby. Some sort of concrete love for the hobby. If you do have that love within you, you're going to have the love and respect for everyone else that wants to be a part of this community and this hobby as well. And we don't want to push people away. Why would we want to ridicule a newcomer coming in and then push them to say, you know what, maybe this wasn't right for me? Look, geek culture, pop culture has already been outcast for decades. And we're in an age where it's becoming more acceptable to enjoy comic books and superheroes and Star Wars and things like this. And it really helps allow people that are maybe socially awkward or don't want to be involved in this kind of social crowd or this kind of social group to have a community that they can feel comfortable in and feel welcome. So that's why I feel at the end of the day, no matter how you collect, and no matter what you think about the other ways of collecting, we have to present ourselves as approachable and respectful to everyone else for whatever reason they collect for. And we can always be here to give our advice. Say, personally, I don't invest in variants because I think ultimately there might not really be a return on investment there because, as soon as the book drops, the values fall flat, and things like that. We can give our advice, just like I gave my advice on hoarding books. But at the end of the day, let's allow it to be that respectful advice. Let's respect each other for the different ways that we collect, and let's continue to have fun doing what we enjoy. So, with that being said, I hope you guys were able to take some of this in. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know why you guys collect. What are your variables that make the hobby fun and enjoyable for you? If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And until next time.